had story where I came back after running one time and, took my legs off and had to like pour the blood out of the bottom just from like, cause I was just like, listen, like I'm
Man.
not going to lose. Like I'm going to win.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode. Today we are joined by Daniel Cloy. Daniel, appreciate you joining us for this episode. Glad to have you on. You're born without your legs, born without your left hand, and kind of how your parents raised you and kind of built you into what you are and how they helped you get through everything.
Yeah. Like I said, thank you for having me. My, like we were talking about, can't talk about my story without talking about my parents. And, they were just a young couple, two people who were interested in having a family. And they've been trying to have one for a long time and have been unsuccessful in doing so. It had some miscarriages and some difficulty, having a kid. And, finally, after a very long time, they gotten some news that they were, going to be having a child. And, at the time, they didn't have all the equipment they do nowadays, and so they've been told they were going to have a healthy child. And I think even at one point they made a joke. They went into an ultrasound, and I'd kind of stuck my right hand up, and my dad was like, "Well, at least he has one hand." And yeah, they didn't know, and so wound up. I was in Birmingham at UAB. It was a research hospital down there, and they on the day of my birth. Surprised all the medical staff and my parents on when I was born. They kind of rushed me out of the room, and my parents were kind of freaking out of what was going on and asking about what was happening with me. And they, the nurse kind of came back and told my dad, listen, Daniel was born missing both of his legs and his left hand. And he said, "Was that it?" And he said, "Well, he said, I want this to happen." He said, "I want to be able to be the one to tell my wife. And, I want you guys to do this." And they said, "Okay." So he walked over to, Lynn, my mom, and said, "Well, honey, she was freaking out." And she's like, "What's wrong with Daniel?" And he's like, "Listen, Daniel was born missing his legs and his left hand." And she said, "Is that it?" And they brought me in and introduced me. And that's kind of how they always treated it, I guess, growing up. They always were just happy to have a child, and excited to nurture and raise one. And they they were mindful of the fact that I was missing limbs, obviously, but they were just excited to introduce me to the world and I don't know, kind of treat me as you would any other child, I guess. If I fell and scraped my knee, kind of get right back up, sort of thing. So
yeah, they kind of looked at it like most parents are winging it anyway. Yeah. So they're just winging it, same way anybody else would, I feel like. But I mean, we talked about it before we started recording. I don't think it sounds like, just hearing from you, you couldn't have asked for two better parents, as far as the situation, the way that they handled it.
Yeah. And even their journeys have been amazing in life, and it continues to teach me stuff even nowadays. My dad's been sick with cancer, and just the way he's gone through that entire process, it still continues to teach me nowadays, just kind of the resolve and the strength that he has and being able to overcome things and just not even bother him. It almost seems superhuman. And I think for him, he's just, he's confident in life and how things are and what's that going to mean after life. And he's just comfortable in his space. And that kind of shone through in parenting. And it didn't really matter in the noise of people talking to my parents and being like, "Well, are you worried about this? Are you concerned about that?" And they were just like, "Well, listen, we're just happy to have a child. And,
right.
we don't care about any of that. Like, we just want Daniel to be happy and healthy and grow up the best way he can and in a good household." And, yeah, I mean, that was always kind of their way of looking at things when they were raising me.
So would you say they were parents that didn't like overreact if you got hurt? They wanted you to like...
Yeah. I mean, even from the start, I learned to walk without my legs at 10 months old on my residual limbs. I got my first pair of prosthetics when I was 12 months. I think the amazing thing of kind of the success behind it is how much they put into it. Even though they felt that way, like they worked with me so much in the background and therapy and stuff, and just like, I'm sure when I was taking my first steps and stuff, just trying to make sure, I wasn't hurting myself, and they were just always constantly that hand to kind of help and guide me along the way. But it was same thing as like, they didn't say, "Oh, well, don't let him ride a bike." They were like, "All right, let's let him try this out and see if he can do it. And how's he going to figure this out?" And those sort of things. So I grew up learning, like I said, how to ride bikes and play different sports, and whether it was golf or soccer or baseball or wide variety of things. They were just kind of like, all right, let's see what happens. And if I got injured, they were the first ones to say, well, let's learn how to work through this, and life is going to throw you some adversity. So how are you going to overcome this?
The first thing that comes to my mind, did you have friends at a young age that you would go out and get trouble with, and you couldn't tell your parents, like, Daniel went down the creek, let's not tell our parents? Something crazy like that,
I mean, I think I was very fortunate at different stages of life to have good friends, but the early ones just kind of, I think when we were younger, they didn't even really think about it. A lot of people, when they get to know me, you almost kind of, I forget about it half the time, to be honest with you. And so when we were younger, I mean, there would be situations that would come up where, I would be doing something and break my prosthetic, and like my foot would fall off, and then be like, oh my gosh, and we're like, all right, now we're good. And stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, later in life, it was more of just like a messing with me and ragging on me sort of thing. Or, we would play some pranks and jokes, or go to the beach or something and take them off and stand them upside down in the sand, look like kids buried upside down, and so stuff like that.
And I think, having that's important. Like, not being treated any different and everything. Like that's one of the things that makes it easier for people to fit in. I told you, one of my good friends' dad, he's lost both of his legs. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've hidden his legs from him when we go somewhere. It's most of the time when you meet people who've, had either born without or had, their legs, arms amputated, they have a way better attitude about it than people think. Like,
usually,
I almost feel like people feel like they're walking on ice around them. And I'm like, you're not going to say something that's just going to catch them off guard and then be like, I can't believe he said that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like everything, you have outliers, right? And I think that's probably why there's probably some outliers out there that people get concerned about. They've seen interactions like that. But for the most part, I think the amputee community is very approachable. For me at least, I'm definitely the type where I'm like, hey, if you have questions, ask, or if you're out in public or your kids do or whatever, I'm happy to answer questions for you. I mean, as humans, we're all kind of innately curious, right? So it does more harm than good if you just leave impressions or things that you're not willing to answer, and then people just assume like, oh, he must just be like a curmudgeon or something and doesn't want to talk about this kind of stuff. Or then their kids growing up thinking about it differently, where they're afraid to ask and don't want to interact with people that are different than them. So, yeah, I mean, we always encouraged it. My parents encouraged it growing up. They were like, yeah, go tell them what's different with you.
Yeah. So I guess, from a younger age, you talked about you kind of had a competitive nature about you, and you got into sports. Kind of tell us what got you into sports. I think it was more your dad.
Yeah.
But what was that kind of path like for you?
So my dad was a college baseball pitcher, and we came from a family of athletes, and he never pressed it on me. But when it started, they needed to work with me in some therapy. They thought I might have been perhaps left-handed instead of right-handed. And so they got me into some OT training to try to strengthen my right arm. And my dad always kind of smiles when he tells the story of they were working with me on throwing a tennis ball. I was probably like, 2 or 3 years old or something, maybe 3 years old. And I was throwing a tennis ball with the therapist, and they had like a glass cabinet, and I threw the ball through the glass cabinet, and they were like, well, he's got an arm on him. And so that they got me into T-ball as a result, to be like, okay, well, maybe this will kind of help him out. And I naturally just kind of fell in love with the game and loved it. And it kind of transitioned at one point from, I never lost the love of the game, but growing up, until I was probably about 10, 12 years old, I was very fortunate to have a very, loving household and great friends and whatnot. And we made a move here to South Carolina from Kentucky. We'd gone to Kentucky after Alabama. And when we got here, I was sort of in middle school, stepping into a group of people that, had a lot of cliques and people that they knew for a long time. And it was not a great situation. And as a result of that, baseball kind of became an outlet for me, because it was all I really had. I didn't have any friends, I spent a lot of time alone and just with my family and anyhow, from that, it kind of developed that competitive chip of like, that chip on the shoulder of just being like, okay, well, I want to go prove people wrong, and I want to be able to show them that, like, I'm made of something. And baseball seemed like a pretty good outlet at the time of something that I enjoyed, but also, could kind of show people that I was more than what they thought of me at the time. And, yeah, I mean, so from about 12 to 15, those were pretty rough years. I tell people all the time, they say, well, gosh, like missing legs and a hand must be a pretty difficult thing, right? And say, honestly, the missing legs and the hand wasn't the hard part of my life. It was how people treated me,
Right.
And the outside influences on me and just, bullying can be cruel, and the things people say can last with you for a lifetime. So anyhow, that's kind of how I guess the competitive nature started, and then transitioned me to keep playing sports down the road.
Yeah, so you got into baseball, and then you ended up going to Riverside High School, which was first place that I ever, played against you.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Did you win? Did you win the first time? Do you remember if they killed?
I don't remember.
We didn't lose very often.
Yeah,
Put it that
I mean,
y'all won.
They won. Riverside, if you make that baseball team, you are a legitimate baseball player.
And this is before club ball was going on big like it is now.
It was
right
kind of
around
its
the
infancy.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was sort of growing into the big
It
thing that
it was
is
just starting up.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember the first time that we ever came and played, and you were on the team. I remember we were riding on the bus, and one of the guys, I can't remember who it was, knew you and is like, they got this guy that pitches and he has no legs and one hand, and I'm like, how's the logistics of that? I'm
How's it
sitting
even
here,
work?
right? I'm like, how does that even work? And then we get there, and I think you came in relief against us at one time or something, and I was just, I mean, I'm sitting there like, well, what's my excuse?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, first off, you were a pitcher, right?
Yep.
And how hard did you throw in high school? How fast were you?
Yeah, so that's probably what stopped me from being able to keep going. So my velocity was always something that I tried to get up, and I wound up, I was probably like maybe touching in the low 80s on a good day, which, I mean, generally speaking is pretty decent, right? But when you're on a very competitive team and different, going on to college and pro, it's just not going to cut it. But I mirrored a very similar style to like Michael Roth, played with him while he was there. And, we had a very strong knowledge of the game and how to play, and, using the cards that we did have on using great off speed and, just the strategy of baseball, if you will. And those were the areas we excelled in.
So let's talk about the mechanics.
Yeah.
Like the wind up. How did you get, like,
Yep.
I'm just visualizing. Did it look different or
not totally? I mean, it looked, I mean, you could tell once you saw you pitch that, it was different, but it was not something where, like, if you didn't know a lot about baseball, you wouldn't be able to really tell.
Okay.
Yeah, most people walking by probably would never have guessed unless somebody was like, hey,
Now, did you always go from the stretch, or did you go
No, I
wind
can
up?
wind
Okay.
up. Yeah, so I guess started off how I trained to learn how to do it. It's very similar to like a Jim Abbott style throwing mechanics, but I'd hold my glove in my left arm, and basically as I would throw, I'd switch and catch with the same hand, and kind of learned how to do that quickly from going up against the wall and throwing a tennis ball up against the wall, and getting to where I could switch on quickly, and then eventually where I could throw it as hard up against the wall as I wanted to, and then switch it on and catch it. And I'd move closer to the wall to try to then, throw it faster and faster until I got it on, and then move closer to the wall for faster reaction time. So I got good enough down the road that, someone hit one right back up in the middle at me, I could switch it on and catch it.
Because that's got to be the biggest fear, is like you catch one right back up the middle, and
you
got to be moving quick.
I mean, I don't know. To be honest, like I never feared that side of it, because I just love playing the game, and just, I don't know, the joy of being out on the field and whatnot, and that competitive nature of just wanting to, succeed and win, that drive. And like it was never like a thing in my mind. I'm like, oh man, if I take one back at me, I was like, all gas and no brakes on, I'm going to go win and I'm going to strike this guy out or something.
So here's a question about it. You've been on prosthetics, you said, your whole life.
Yep.
have you gotten to a point? Now I know you can never feel your legs, but have
Yeah.
you gotten to a point like the extension that you feel like
Yeah.
you can almost feel a
Yep.
little bit?
You just get, I tell people it's kind of similar to like, if you've ever worn like a walking boot or something where, at first, you know, you're pretty clumsy with it, knocking it all around and whatnot. But after you've worn it for some time, you kind of have that spatial reasoning of where it's at and can kind of even sort of feel it if something bumps up against you or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of seems similar to that. It's probably the best way I could describe
Yeah.
it. Maybe a little bit more heightened, but that's kind of how, and that's how I sort of view it. Like my parents, the way they raised me out of that is, for me, it was like, well, instead of you waking up in the morning and, you know, putting on your shoes for the day and kind of your routine, if you will, that was, for me, it was just, instead of putting on my shoes, it was putting on my legs for the day. And are there some more difficult things that come about that? 100%. But is it something I dwell on or think about? No, not at all. I mean, great example of that. And I get invited to go speak with, you know, kids groups and different people and whatnot in businesses. But I'll tell people is when you start your day, right, like a lot of luxuries that people take for granted are, if you're running late, how many times have you had where you just like jump out of the bed and run to the shower and, you know, jump into some clothes real quick and jolt out the door, make your coffee, whatever you want to do. And for me, you know, it starts with pretty much when I wake up, I have to kind of lift myself out of the bed, crawl into the shower, you know, turn on all the showers and stuff while I'm crawling early in the morning. Doesn't matter if I feel bad, if I'm sick, if it's cold, if I want to go turn up the heat, I got to crawl over to where the heat is and turn it up, or take the time to assemble and put on my legs and then go in there. Right. So it's easier sometimes to slide off, go and get ready for the day. And then after you get out of the shower, then you have to, like, you know, dry off, do everything, come back to the bed, hoist yourself up on the bed, put your legs on, and then after you do all that, you can finally start getting ready for the day. And that's every single day for my entire life without,
Right.
and it's something that it doesn't even really register as much. Like when I talk about it like that, it seems like a big thing, but for me, like,
You don't
it's
even
just like
think
putting
about
on
it.
your shoes in the day. Right. And so I don't know if like just the, you know, the behavioral patterns like that kind of trained me to growing up on, like I said, for, just the overcoming things or like trying to push through things or think about things differently or how I was going to do it, just because I've had to do that since such a young age. But I think that probably is where it starts, you know, is situations like that have caused me to think about stuff a little bit differently. So, but I don't know, when you think about that in comparison, people are always like, wow. But for me, it's just, I don't know, it's what I have to do.
Right. So you went from Riverside High School, and then tell us about, you know, going into college baseball.
Yeah.
You know, did you walked on at Anderson?
Yes.
And you walked on at College of Charleston where you went later.
So I tried to walk on at CSC,
Okay.
but so yeah, at Anderson, walked onto the team there. Wound up getting hurt. I've been through a lot of injuries. I've had 14 knee dislocations, 7 in each knees, and having to come through that. And that just comes with the process of trying to, what you were asking on trying to get the velocity up is I wound up actually breaking some high school weightlifting records for leg press to try to build strength in my legs to be able to drive harder. And anyhow, just combination of not having ankles and, you know, the impact of landing and trying to be competitive and play other sports or messing around like playing backyard football or something and, you know, going up against another guy and taking a side shot in the knee, those sort of things. But from all, I had some other injuries that were existing, and then I also got hurt while I was there. So I made the team at AU, and I had to recover a knee and a shoulder surgery my freshman year. So unfortunately, I actually didn't even get. I played in inter squads, you know, and didn't get to see any action on the field during that. It took me. I went to a doctor, and he said that he wasn't even sure I should even play again. And that was some pretty hard news to hear, as you can imagine. And and so my sophomore year, I took off from playing, just went to school, and I was like, you know, I felt really defeated from that, and that was kind of a lower point for sure of just trying to kind of figure out myself and what that meant, because baseball had been such a large part of my life. And kind of had a moment where I was dating my now wife at the time and was talking to her and just saying, like, you know, I feel like I got more in the tank, you know, and she said, well, you know, I know this means a lot to you and that the physicians are saying you shouldn't, but if you think you should, give it a go. And so really trained, probably the hardest I ever had, my sophomore and junior, and going into my junior, we transferred down to College Charleston. I had a former teammate who was down there, and had talked to him about maybe coming to try on. Through inter squads for the first 5 weeks my freshman year. Only gave up 2 hits, throw against some second and third rounders in there. And I think the consensus from the team and the coaches was like, hey, this guy can play. We'd love to have you on board, but we're a very competitive program. You just don't throw hard enough. You don't light up the radar gun. And so didn't make the team that year. Went after it just as hard the following year for my senior year. And kind of same story through inter squads. Only gave a couple hits. And, they basically were like, hey, would love to have you, but, we can't do this. And so I think that was some good closure for me in the sense of like, I probably pushed my body as far as it could go, and it's kind of amazing how far it has taken me in life, and I'm very grateful for that. And I don't know, it was just I didn't get to continue my baseball journey out of that, but there was some where one door kind of shut, another opened on. They had asked me to they found out about my story and asked me to do the College of Charleston magazine, so I was very blessed to be featured on the cover story for that, and then from that kind of opened up some other doors on getting into, from the filming industry, gave me a call, and that was kind of how all that worked out.
And that's where you were on The Walking Dead?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, funny story with that one. So I was sitting in my, our house. I roomed with 5 other guys, and I was with also my wife now, and she was, I got this phone call, and basically it was like, hey, is this Daniel Cloy? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, is this the Daniel Cloy missing his legs and a hand? And I was like, yeah, like who's asking, and they're like,
it's a weird way to start the
yeah,
conversation.
very odd. Like never had that one.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, yeah, I am that guy, but what do you want to know? And they're like, oh, this is casting the director from The Walking Dead, and I didn't watch a lot of TV, so I was just like, okay. He's like, well, it's a show. We want to have you on and have you do some stuff. I was just like, let me call you back. And so I called Heather, and I was like, hey, you have some friends that are trying to prank me or something? This something dead walking dead. Like, I was like, it's probably just nothing. She was like, you talking about The Walking Dead? And I was like, yeah, you know it? And she was like, yeah, it's a TV show. And I was like, oh. She's like, why are you asking? I said, some guy called me and asked me about it. She's like, you should go do that. Like, that's a thing. And I called him back, and sure enough, they had me down to Atlanta, and I was a featured zombie role for that. I actually got to go in the season twice, and they had asked me on to do some other filming stuff.
Now, which season were you on?
Yeah, so let's see. Season 4, episode 1 was the first appearance, and then the second one, I believe, was season 7, episode 1, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So
Okay. And they shot in Atlanta?
Yeah, that was a cool process.
So what was it like being on set? And
Yeah.
how long are you there?
Were the people nice? Did
Oh,
you get
yeah.
to meet who do you remember meeting from the?
Yeah, a lot of the cast.
Yeah.
The show, Greg Nicotero and Norman Reedus, and a lot of the crew. Very welcoming both times. It was really interesting to be a part of it because I didn't grow up in theater. It just wasn't an interest of mine prior to all of this, right? And it was a really interesting. It opened my mind in a lot of ways. Like I grew a lot of respect for people that are in the business and how hard they work, and watching what all goes into it. And it's really amazing at the end of the day on even just like how long it took to get, dressed up in all the prosthetics and the makeup and what they do to try to just create, the world of television and shows and trying to bring that to an audience. It's pretty incredible. I kind of asked while I was on the show, I said, well, you hear often that people say people in Hollywood can be jerks and this, that, and the other, right? I said, well, what's y'all's impression of it from the inside? They said, well, look, it's kind of like this, like anything in life. If you've had massive amounts of success, people have been there and done that. They're usually very humble and very easy to get along with people because, they know what it's taken to get to that point, and they've had that success, and they want to treat others the way that they have wanted to be treated most of the time. And they say it's the one that have just kind of had the taste of the spotlight that, they can really become kind of a prima donna and whatnot. And those are the ones that are kind of tougher. And so I was, since the show was obviously had a lot of notoriety and became a huge thing, most of the people that were on it were, very welcoming, very humble and cool people. So some were very interested in my background and wanting to know what it was like missing legs, and I kind of was asking them in turn, what's it like being in Hollywood? So,
right. Get to trade stories with each other.
That's cool.
So you were you're on The Walking Dead. Another thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was you also got the opportunity to do a TEDx talk.
Yeah.
And in that TEDx talk, you talk about the Cloy concept. How did it come about that you ended up on the TEDx talk, and where did the Cloy concept kind of come? Where did you come up with that, and when?
Yeah. It was kind of all honestly around the same time. I had been asked for a really long time on people saying, you know, you should go talk to groups and you should talk, especially to like kids and schools, and just try to share with people like what your life has been like and see if it can somehow connect and help them through some of the things they're going through. And I, you know, if you know me well enough, I'm not really the type that I like to just get cast into the spotlight and kind of attention seeking like that. I just kind of trying to live life and go. And anyhow, through that process, my wife and I had been at like it was part of our venue through a guy we knew that had helped set up for where we got married. And he was kind of involved with TEDx and whatnot, and had been curious about my story, and basically said, hey, look, I think you should do this. And, you know, I think it'd be interesting for people to hear some about your background. And I really didn't have that much experience in public speaking at the time, and was kind of hesitant of doing it. Hindsight, to be honest, they had actually offered for me to come on the following year, but it was right at the time they were about to launch doing Into It. And so I had wanted to have a little bit more time to prep for it. And, you know, I guess you're always critical of yourself after the fact. Hindsight's 2020, but it was kind of rushed into doing it, and it was fun. I had a great time. Also, awesome people. It was really neat to be a part of that entire process. But
Now, was that your first time speaking in front of that big of a group of people?
Maybe not that. It was interesting. I'd been in front of like some large groups before that, not recorded like that, but I'd been in front of like actually some pretty. I think that one, the live audience was maybe like, I don't know, 600 people or something. I've probably been in front of groups of at least a few thousand minimum, maybe 3, 4, 5,000 before that. So in terms of getting in front of people, it wasn't as much, but it's kind of like a recorded, rehearsed sort of a venue, you know, is definitely a very different platform. But through that, I kind of was like, you know, I'm going to start trying to create a way of teaching people of like, well, what goes through my mind when I'm approaching going through difficult task or facing some adversity, or like, you know, how I'm approaching life and whatnot. And that was kind of where I sort of initiated the Cloy concept idea of just like saying, okay, if I was to teach a kid of like how to bottle up on, you're going to go through something really hard, I could try to, you know, transpose the way I think about things. That was kind of where that started out of all of that.
Yes,
Okay.
so that leads me into one of the questions we had is talking to younger kids or new amputees.
Yeah.
And also talking to people that maybe have depression issues. You said that you've done that before.
Yep.
So just talk through that. Like, do people just ask you to do it? And how do you approach them both the same, or do you have a different concept to talk to somebody who has depression versus a new amputee?
Yeah, so I they're kind of similar in some ways. They vary obviously in for example, the people I've talked with amputees, a lot of times it can be, not all the time, but a lot of times it can be traumatic, right? And so that's a little different in nature with somebody that's going through a traumatic accident, that you're trying to help them kind of get through that mental process of how to overcome that kind of adversity, right? And then on top of that, thinking through like, okay, now my life has changed. What is this going to look like going forward? Versus, you know, someone that's going through maybe more of a difficulties or vulnerabilities when they're themselves facing some challenges, or maybe like, you know, depression or a wide variety of issues, right? Those are different conversations on saying like, hey, well, what kind of struggles do you carry with you? Because for me, a lot of things people look at is they say, well, missing legs and a hand is hard. They're just looking at the outside, right? And a lot of times it's the inner journey and the inner battle that we're all dealing with that's the hardest one. And so, yeah, I've been through a lot of those as well. And some people are going through same and similar things. But a lot of times just kind of open up the conversation, being able to talk about, you know, how did I look at some things, and how did it affect me, and how did I feel going through those things, and what did the people around me look like, and how were they supporting me during those times? And a lot of those things, I guess, have some similarities and can help people overcome some of those challenges. And sometimes it's me sort of leading that conversations. A lot of times it's more the times than not, it's them approaching me and seeing me walking on the street or something, or out at the grocery store or whatever. And, that's usually where those conversations get initiated. But, either way, I'm always happy to help. And,
Now, what's the difference when you're talking to somebody that, has lost a limb in a traumatic accident versus, somebody who's been born without a limb?
Yeah.
I imagine those groups look at it completely differently because
They do.
Like you said, you're used to it at this point. It's something where you don't even think about it a lot of times, but with them, this is all new. It's a shock, and they're having to learn everything.
Or I would throw in there, I know someone had cancer on their leg or something, and they had to remove.
Like
so that
carcinoma.
would be, that's.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I talked about, the hardest thing was around the way people treated me, right? Is like, I think less about the physical side of it or the how-tos on like, do I need to worry about stepping off of this curb and do I feel uncomfortable doing it, or what's my surroundings like? Because it's so natural to me at this point that I'm not even aware of it. Like I could be texting and have a blindfold on and probably stepping around curbs, and I just, I'm able to kind of traverse and not even think about second nature at that point, right? Versus someone that's gone through something traumatic like that, they're having to really reteach and relearn everything on top of, I mean, I've also been fortunate, right, that I haven't had the physical pain, just for starters. I haven't had to go through the actual amputation, and having something cut off or the loss involved with that. If you have a limb and then, the next day you wake up and it's gone, I mean, that's a tremendous psychological change.
Yes.
And so I fortunately never had to have that. And so not only are you dealing with that, then you're trying to think of like, well, how do you do this? And for me, it's sort of like, how did you teach yourself to walk, right? Like, I mean, you don't even really remember. You just kind of did it growing up, and now you just do it like second nature. And so imagine losing that skill and then trying to have to learn it all over again at a later point in life. And so, there's some big differences in that. But there's a lot of shared experiences in the way of, what is it like wearing them, or fatigue and things like that, where if you're standing up at a concert for a long time, amputees, you'll kind of notice them. They kind of sway around from left to right because they're sort of adjusting their weight from left to right off of one leg to try to give a little bit more endurance and not, hurting their limbs over time. And so, little nuances like that we all kind of chat about, or that they're really hot. Like if you're a hot-natured person, prosthetics are not fun because it's like wearing ski pants all times of the year.
Right.
Questions that come up like that they're same and similar for somebody that lost it traumatically versus born with it, but we can all kind of have those shared conversations.
Do you get more questions based towards like how you've dealt with the way that people talk to you or look at you, or do you get more questions about like how do you just physically deal with it?
Kind of both.
Yeah.
The main one that I think I offer the most help on with people going through it is kind of that psychological approach once again on going through life with it and the people and how they treat you with it. I always tell people, they're like, I've had a wide variety of questions. I've had people be like, well, my grandkids look at me differently because of this, or my family, or how my coworker is going to react to this, and well, I feel confident from how I look, and even for like dating someone, that's been I've been very fortunate to find somebody that cared enough for me that now, it's my life partner. And you just get a very wide range of questions on that. On a lot of it's just kind of as humans, like the insecurities and vulnerabilities that we all have, right? And it just kind of casts that into the front of everything, where you're like, okay, how are we going to deal with this? And so, those are a lot more of the type conversations.
Yeah, one of the things that me and Shane wanted to dive deep into was your vulnerabilities, because we all have them. Like, what are the things that worry you the most? Like for me, not that I'm insecure. If I'm laying in bed at night, I would be thinking if something happened, like I got to move, right? Somebody breaks in, I got to move. That would be my vulnerability. Just trying to put myself in your shoes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many of them, but for example, let's just talk about like something as simple as like weight, right? Like if you have a lot of weight gain or just your physical appearance, or like obviously I'm sporting no hair now versus I've had hair back in the day. Like, it's something that you have that ability as a person usually to be pretty anonymous, right? Like if you guys go to a different city where nobody knows you or something, like for the most part, people aren't really paying attention to you. Like they are, but they're not. Right. And versus if you're an amputee, like you just inherently draw attention and people are kind of watching and looking and interested, or kids are pointing or like, what's that? And so, if you don't feel like you're presenting yourself best, or like say you've had some weight gain or a change or something you're just insecure about, it sort of amplifies that a lot, right? What's interesting is very similar to like celebrities. For celebrities, like they struggle a lot of times where they get a lot of fame or something, right? And they're not comfortable with themselves. And you see kind of how that goes where, on good days they're fine, but even at like when they have a bad day, it's just like shoved into the spotlight and everyone's dealing with it. And it kind of feels like that in some ways where, if you're just going through the motions of life and say you have an argument with your spouse or something, like now you're having an argument with your spouse, but like everyone's looking at you and wondering what's going on. And you're trying to deal with all of that. And it's very challenging, or getting asked like, and totally fine, but getting asked like 18 times a day, like if I was served in the military or, if I was in a car accident.
What about rude questions? I mean, I'm sure you get just rude questions. And at some point, like for me, just like you said, you're like a celebrity. So you have to go out in a good mood and deal with the rude questions like a celebrity does. But there comes a point, I'm sure, and I put myself in it, when you get a rude question and it's been a long day, you're like, really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It maybe goes back to my parents, right? Of like, I don't know if I'm just like an empath as a person, but I always try to put it in the position of like understanding if that person's coming up to me and they're interacting with me, like I know why it is. Like it's okay. You know what I mean? So I'm able to kind of like mentally process of like, okay, I need to, have this interaction and understanding and compassion of why they're coming to me from this. So I don't usually like, I don't know if I've ever really like gotten upset with someone or snapped on someone for being like, why are you asking me this or something?
Yeah.
But there are situations where it's like, I almost can't not go along with it because for example, I have a huge military family background, right? And I respect our armed forces tremendously. And so I never want to have like stolen valor. And I'm very always straightforward and being like, I was born missing my legs. I appreciate you offering. Thank you for the support, but that's not me, But there are some cases where it's like, I've had where it's like a 97-year-old lady who like, almost can't comprehend her surroundings and what's going on, right? And she just like wants to shake my hand and say like, thank you so much. It would do more damage out of the embarrassment of being like,
right,
okay, I'm not going to embarrass this person in Home Depot for like making a misjudgment on this or something. So I'll just try to kind of be like, oh, thank you or whatever. And, kind of move on. But if the conversation persists, I usually try to find a tactful way of being like, okay, this is actually the case. You get some interesting situations. Like we were out with some friends recently, and this guy just like basically jumped up from a table while I was walking on a sidewalk and just like saluted me like while I was like literally walking next to it. I mean, it's just like, what do you do with that?
Everybody that's lost the limb is military related.
Yeah. So
I mean, do you get people just walk up? And I know this is a weird question. Go, I just want to pray for you or something like that.
Yeah,
and,
you get some.
And
like,
I would be the one. Don't pray for. I'm
doing just fine.
I'm doing.
Yeah. I mean, I try. That's where I in a tactful way, right? Like I'm just saying, like thank you for thinking of me for that. I'm good though. Like I've lived a good life, and I appreciate that. But
I just imagine like some of the kids that come up to you, because kids they're brutal. They're they have
filter.
No filter. It's straight to the point. And I mean, I'm just imagining. I told my son the other night that I was sitting down with you, and he was super excited to hear it just because he loves baseball so much. But you could see in his head he had a million questions, and so I just look at it like the kids coming up to you. Just at some point, you're probably just laughing with the question.
I mean, I really do enjoy it when kids do that. To be honest, that part I love because it's always out of place of innocence most of the time, or not knowing or some concern. Like you have such an opportunity there, right, to like shape and mold people in that moment. And so I enjoy that so much on a lot of times. And that's where I talk to new amputees is I'd be like, listen, like the energy you put off is how you're going to be received out of that. Right. So if some kids are coming up or they're looking and they're kind of concerned about what's going on, and I'm all like, reserved and not wanting to talk to them, acting like awkward about it, it's going to, perpetuate that with them. Right. Versus if I'm sitting there and I'm like, hey, like, you want to check out my robot legs? Like, like come over and check these out. Like, look, they're cool if you knock them, they're hard and totally different. They're like, wow, and then they'll get into like, so you can't feel your feet. And they're like, if I stomp on your foot right now, like, you want to be a feeling? Like, no, go ahead. They just love like drawing into that energy.
And the more exposure and at a younger age that you get, the less awkward situations people are going to get into.
It's always the peers. I always tell people that all the time. Like, that is the hardest part. I mean, the stuff that happens, like, and I know this is kind of backing up on it some, but even like going through the dating phases of life, right, and growing up missing limbs, and then just what all goes into that, right? Like, I mean, I remember I went up to like a crush early on, just an example, and like how peers can just be so cruel, right? There's a way of doing things and there's a way of doing things, right? And easily I walked up to like a crush and said, hey, I'm interested in you. I'd love to go on a date or whatever. It was like, even if you had legs and a hand, you'd never be good enough.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. How old were you when that happened?
Like probably 13.
Oh, that is devastating.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's where you're like,
that hurt my feelings.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you're battling, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're sitting there and you're like, okay.
And then that's in your head.
Yeah. And you're like, I am inherently
all
different.
the time.
I'm inherently different than most people.
So let's go down that road.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your dating past.
Yeah.
So that happened at 13. When did you go on your first real date, and what was that like?
That was tough. So I went on some. That was an interesting journey. So I had some close friends that actually, I mean, it brought them to tears over this. Like they at this point in high school, I had by this point done kind of a complete 180. When I was in middle school, was like tormented for years, and it was an awful time. Right? They had to even bring some intervention in, and it was a whole thing. When I got to high school, I basically knew 2 people going into all of Riverside, and it was just like, for me, it was like, this is a new ability for me to transform into something completely new. And one of the things I'm most proudest of was by the time I left Riverside, I got voted on as for the Spirit of Riverside, which is an award they give out to one individual that the entire faculty, all the students vote on, as somebody that's like kind of Mr. Popular, but also like everybody, that believes they stand for the school. They're well liked. They are involved in different events and whatnot, and different, participate in sports maybe, or clubs or whatever, right? And so it was interesting to me going from somebody that for like 2 years, people wouldn't even talk to me because they thought I was such an outcast and such a different kind of person, right? To them being like at a school with several thousand, being voted on as like the guy within a very short time frame of flipping on that. And so what was crazy during that was having a lot of friends that were a part of that journey in high school, and they were like, listen, like, you're on a nationally ranked baseball team, like crushing it, making newspaper, you know what I mean, being on news articles, and like, I worked really hard, and we didn't come from a lot of money, but I saved up and like bought this super awesome sports car when I was in high school. And I mean, from the outside, people were just like, man, like, it was, and I was really enjoying life, right? But it was a component of that I was missing, being able to have like connection through relationships, and that was, and knowing I'd been through a lot of that. And so on one hand, you would have some people that would like take a date, and she would do it just from like the optics of it or whatever, right? And so that was probably like in the high school area, maybe, I don't know, 17 or something. And then others that like didn't want anything with the optics surrounding it. Like they were afraid to be like, well, I might be the weird person for dating somebody missing limbs, right? And so like what was interesting was I had friends that were just like, no, you're definitely gonna like, just go out there and try. And I'd be like, I would know. I'd tell them, be like, listen, like, she's not gonna take a date. Like, I know she's not, because she don't want to be viewed. She'd be like, you're crazy. I'll try it. And like it would shake them up, like visibly, where they'd just be like, you are a good dude. And you're like, I cannot believe that someone would be like that, and just couldn't even understand it. It was funny, after that time, they came back, and I had one friend that was very close named Drew, and he said, I think what this is going to do for you is it's going to be a filter. And he was like, most of us have to go through all these horrible relationships in life and learn how to like, deal with bad relationships and people that aren't interested for the right reasons, and like treating me, and getting poor treatment, or people that cheat on you, or, whatever, right? Or don't love you for you. They're just in it for whatever, right? And so he said, I think this is going to be a filter for you, and that you're just not going to have to go through the pain a lot of that. And you're going to find somebody that really cares about you and loves you for you and wants to be in it for the right reasons. And, he was absolutely right. I mean, I luckily didn't have to go through a lot of painful dating history, and found my wife at an early age. We started dating 18, I think, and dated all through college, and for, 4 years dated, got engaged for a year, and then we've been married for 10 years now. And she's been by my side ever since, an amazing person. And yeah, I mean, just, I don't know. It's interesting kind of reliving and talking through that journey, but,
Did you know she was the one though?
oh yeah.
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 So what's it been like for her? Has she had to make any adjustments?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure she has.
That's been kind of the most interesting part of, like, a lot of times, it's not even my life going through it. It's like,
Just
it's kind of
hers.
weird, like having her share that journey. Right. And yeah, I mean, she has changed a lot as a person on kind of the stuff we're talking about, like, the patience and going through that. I mean, a lot of times, like, her having to, she's really wanting to go on a date and just have like an us night. Right. And getting interrupted 3 or 4 times throughout the evening on people coming up and ask questions. She just wanted to have that time. And so, that's been an interesting journey to navigate together and watch her grow in that as we've gotten older and grown together. So, it's taught a lot of life lessons for sure. And that's, I think no matter what your age, they're relevant, right? Like, people that are going into a new dating journey, they hear that kind of stuff and they get concerned on, people aren't what they were when they're 16 versus when they're 40 and trying to figure it out. Right. And dealing with maybe they're a very different position in their life where their body image is very different, or psychologically, or trying to figure out some things. And I think it's relevant just to hear that kind of stuff, to think about everybody else's journey.
Now, did y'all know each other, before you started dating, or was it just kind of a
Yeah.
thing where you saw her and went up and asked
So
her? Or-
no, she had kind of just the stars aligned in the sense of that she had moved from Michigan, which also is a little bit different culture than down here in the Southeast, right? Like, people are a little bit more just like, they don't care quite as much on the noise of, everybody else, to some degree, a little bit more straight and direct on ways. And so she had moved down here my senior year of high school, and we were in English class, and she sat like two seats behind me or whatever, and we sort of knew each other a little bit and talking. I think she probably had more interest in me, and I didn't even realize at the time, just because I had a lot less,
I was going to ask you, was she
Yeah.
more smitten to begin with than you? you
Yeah.
think?
Oh, I mean, we have some kind of crazy stories out of that. So, like, for example, I was telling you about the Spirit of Riverside thing. We had home base or whatever. And so she came in and they were voting on, like, the people to win this award, right? My name was on the board. She had voted for it thinking it was a neat last name, and coming to find out, she'd wound up sitting behind me. And so I think she, like, kind of knew about who I was and was, like, newer to moving down here, and also was just immersing herself in an entirely new culture, right? And trying to kind of figure it out. And we didn't. She actually wanted to start dating somebody else at first. And then I think she just it was kind of one of those things. She always, thought about me. And so she actually reached out first on maybe going into our freshman year, and just was kind of like, hey, she kind of made this thing up with son. Like, I remember the car ad. She was like, I think I saw you driving out somewhere the other day. And I was like, oh, yeah, that was me. I was like, I knew it wasn't me. So I was like, oh, she's like, trying to reach out and say, hey. And I invited her over to a friend's house, and kind of the rest was history, I guess, after that. But I think I knew, like, when I started hanging out with her, one of the biggest attributes that missing limbs gives is, like, because you interact with so many people and you get to see the side of them, it's almost like I don't even know, like a sixth sense of, like, you're able to just understand people's intentions and see through them and understand people, and, like, just get really close reads on them very quickly.
Yeah.
And, with her, that was immediately how I felt and knew. Because, I mean, I've had it my whole life, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, think about being 5 years old or 7 years old, and, like, you understand that adults are talking about you in the corner, and they're talking about their kids about you in the corner, and, like, you're a kid, and, like, you're understanding and receiving all that information. It's like that your entire life. And so, I mean, it develops, like, a very keen sense, and that's been the biggest part to overcome, is that anxiety and those vulnerabilities. Like, that part of it has been the heart of just being like, you're so consciously aware of it all around you at all times.
So for me, I have a name for that, Shane. What do I call that? I call it my Appalachian psychic ability because I feel like I had anxiety. I had high anxiety.
He thinks he's a psychic.
Yeah.
No. I had the same anxiety in middle school,
Yeah.
but for different things, right? Because I always felt like I didn't belong. I come from a poor family.
Yeah.
And then when I got in high school, it was the same thing. I just was ready to go to work,
Yeah.
right? I just wanted to get out of there. I was ready to go to work. I was ready to start my career, and I actually did early. So for me, I feel the same way. I kind of feel like I was always listening for somebody doubting me, and part of my drive, Shane will tell you, is I like to prove people wrong.
Yeah. So,
Right. So it's the same thing because I feel like I can relate. I had that same feeling that, okay, I'm just going to prove these people wrong. So I want to hurry up and get through the minor, like school. I'm ready to start my life.
Yeah. Oh, definitely got, that was the same sense of like with school is frustrating for me, like sitting in classes, because I was always the type of like, I just want to go out and,
Yeah.
you know, go win and try to, whatever it is in my career life or anything, like, you know, I mean, I was trying to absorb as much as I could of what was useful, but a lot of stuff I'd be sitting there like, you know, the 47, you know, like who was the 47th president or whatever, you know, and you're sitting there kind of like, okay, like how am I going to use this to like advance my, like I want to learn about taxes, you know, I want to learn about,
Yes.
yeah, you know,
finances.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was certain things that I excelled in, which would be, I would say, history, social studies, and economics.
Yeah.
Was really all I just hit because I was ready. That's what I needed to start my life.
Now, you on the TEDx talk, one thing that I wanted to ask you about was you brought out a device for helping you with lifting weights. So was that kind of your first jump into prosthetics and, you know, ending up in a prosthetics business later on?